Ah.
Okay, greetings. Welcome, everybody. Akwaba. My name is Clancy Williams, and I'm the Secretary for the UK Association of Black Psychologists. It's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to our live stream this evening on our theme, Hope. I am the Secretary for the Association of Black Psychologists and the Director of Angels Without Wings, and I'm an Emotional Emancipation Circle Lead Facilitator. And I'm also going to be your host for this evening. But before we do anything else, I'm going to ask permission from our elders to speak. Permission granted, thank you. And we have been really privileged to join the National Association of Black Psychologists in their series responding to the effects of COVID-19. And so today we're going to be embarking upon a conversation around our theme of hope. Hope, which is helping our people to emerge. But before we do any of that, I'm going to ask Davy to take us through our libation.
Okay. We call upon our ancestors, far and near, father of our fathers,
mother of our mothers,
to render mercy,
to bear witness,
bear witness
to the liberation and victory of our people.
forever.
It is done.
Ashe.
Thank you for that, Davy. So this evening joining me is Dr. Michelle Perry-Springer, who is the President of the Association of Black Psychologists UK Chapter and Clinical Educational Psychologist. Davy Hay, Managing Director of Pattygift Therapy Services. Marie Newcomb, our elder, former president of the UK chapter of the Association of Black Psychologists and the director of Pattygift African Centre Therapy Services. Dr. Theopia Jackson is the current president of the National Association of Black Psychologists. We also have joining us today Dr. Baba Wade Nobles, former president and founder of the National Association of Black Psychologists, along with Mama Vera Wade, retired educator, adjunct professor of Africana Studies and Linguistics. Professor Kehinde Andrews is joining us from BCU, Birmingham Central University, and he is the professor of the first Black British Studies MA programme and BA programme in Europe. Dr. Deon Taylor is the lead for the Black Women's Studies, Senior Lecturer in Sociology, and Deputy Programme Manager Lead for the Black British Studies Programme in Birmingham Central University. Viv Amoun, futurologist and co-founder of Black Socks. Ukila Prophet is our spoken word artist who will be bringing a spoken word performance to us later today. Maxine Tomlinson, Regional Chair of ADPAC Birmingham, African Diaspora Political Action Committee. And Maxine is also the author of Musings with Max and is a system lead for Joining Up Children's Services in Birmingham. Dean Okai is business owner, entrepreneur, and the Strategic Advisory Committee Director for ADPAC. Malcolm Phillips, lead facilitator for the EEC, Emotional Emancipation Circles in the UK, and counselling programme lead for Hestia. And Anna Douglas is our administrator for the UK Association of Black Psychologists and the secretary for Pattygift African Therapy Services. Thank you, welcome to all of our presenters, and thank you so kindly for answering the call to come out and share with us and just to have this conversation. I know that we are live streamed across the globe, so welcome to our families in America, welcome to the family in the Caribbean, in Africa, in UK, in Canada and beyond. We are really grateful that you have chosen to be with us this evening. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Michelle Perry-Springer.
Greetings, beloveds. It's really fantastic to be here and to be among such brilliant minds, and really encouraged and excited about what we're going to be talking about today. I have the honor of inviting to speak our elder. I'm not sure she's ready for that privilege, but we are holding her in high esteem, and that is Ramarie, and the founding member of UKAbpsi chapter, the first president of this chapter. She's also the current ABPsi international representative, founding member of Patty Therapy Service, and who has spent the majority of her working life for the betterment of the Black psychology, to ensure that we advance as people, that we're psychological well, that we are making sure that we are putting our best step forward, and that she's using therapies that are culturally grounded in what we know is right and well for us. So I'm not going to say much more, because Ramarie is going to say what she has to say, but really listen to what she has to say, because it is really food for the soul. And we thank you, Ramarie.
Let me get my mute. It's unmuted. Thank you for that. It's interesting, this concept of becoming an elder, particularly in this culture, because getting old, particularly if you're female, is not particularly seen as something that is what one would want to aspire to. But actually, from within our culture, wise women are revered, as they should be. And there is an acknowledgement that from this position of experience, of simply continuing to get up every day and to keep on functioning and to consolidate the learning and the experience that we get, to hand that over and to make way for the next generations to come, we have to move out of that position. We have to move out of being the words that come to my mind are things like the fertile ones, the ones that are bringing birth into the world. Now we have to make way for the next generation to do that, but we need to ensure that we leave something solid for them to stand on, for them to be able to link onto. And that is the work that I and my partner, business partner Davey Hay, have been, and Malcolm in the past, have really worked towards ensuring that the legacy that we leave here in the UK is founded on solid evidence and work that we've brought over from the United States, from the Black psychology movement there, from the African-centered psychology movement there. They have done incredible work, which we are leaning on very heavily. And we give great thanks for that. So we are incredibly proud to be part of ABPsi and to have got a chapter here in the UK, so we can spread the word, so we can spread the knowledge and the experience, and so that the whole community can ground itself. Interestingly enough, I and actually 3 or 4 of the other current and past board members of ABPsi here in the UK are not, technically speaking, psychologists. But as I will speak later and talk about the whole concept of what psychology is and what psychologists are and what they should be doing, we are very much psychologists. So on that note, I want to say thank you. Welcome, as Clancy and Michelle have said, welcome to this conversation. We will bring some wisdom, we will bring experience, we will certainly bring enthusiasm and love, and we hope you thoroughly enjoy the conversation we're going to have today. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Ramarie. And I think it's really important, a really important point that you mentioned about the Black psychology, because a couple of questions that have been coming up was about, do you have to be a psychologist in order for you to be part of the Association of Black Psychologists? And as you rightfully mentioned, you're going to go on and explain in broader terms the concept and the meaning behind that. So just to let people know from the offset, you do not have to be a psychologist in order for you to participate or be interested or get involved with the Association of Black Psychology. You simply have to have a keen interest in the psychology of us as Black people and moving us forward. So thank you for that reminder, Marie. So Michelle, I'm just going to hand over to you again so that you can introduce our next speaker.
Before I do that, Clancy, I think one of the things that I'd really like to share with is what we have done, even as small as we are at the moment, from a UK perspective, but leaning, like Marie says, on the shoulders of national in the US. In response to COVID-19, we really did kind of roll our sleeves up, and as I was going through all of the things that we have in these 8 short weeks kind of pulled together, because we knew that our community needed it. We knew that our community needed to hear from us. We probably weren't ready, like everybody globally wasn't ready for what has transpired. But I think we heeded the call. And I just wanted to kind of share with those that are listening this evening about some of the things that we did. The very first thing we did look to national, and we're very grateful for the works from Bubba Wade around Zola Up, and I know he's going to share some of that with us, from the words of Dr. Linda James Myers, of encouragement, of just recognizing that we've got this, that although it was as it was in the States, as it is here in the UK, having a significant impact on the Black community, that actually don't forget that we've been here before, and we've got things in our arsenal that we can use. So we recognize the call and the grieving of our ones that were lost and have been lost to COVID-19, and in their transitioning, remember that we have rituals and cultural traditions that we can pull on and go to, and just sit in the knowledge of that. And Clancy very quickly pulled together a nice document that we were able to share with our loved ones about how to do this, how to do 9 nights on a Zoom, and just make sure that we did the kinds of sends off that we are accustomed to doing. We have created a children's circle called Enwata that has children from states, from Canada, the States, from the Caribbean, from Africa, from here in the UK, and we sit every couple of weeks and we just plant things. And we have a beautiful sister called Michelle who sits under a tree in the Caribbean and just does some storytelling. That is beautiful. It's a beautiful thing just to see the children banging on a drum and singing songs, and that's what we need to make sure that our children are well, and this is some of the response that we've had. We've also been very involved in getting the EECs, emotional emancipation circles, online. That is a work in process, and that is something that we know we're going to be able to offer very soon. So we have really pulled our socks up and rolled our sleeves up so that we can make sure that we were here doing the work that we need to do to make sure that our community is well. One of the things that Clancy did as well was she designed and recorded a broadcast that was then sent to radio stations. We have been really busy in trying to make sure that the community with whom we sit and the community that we love have something that they can hold on to during this time. And I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of that hard work that's been done. But we know there's more to be done. We know that this isn't the end of it, and really sometimes it's just the beginning. And I think one of the points of today is really to make sure that we are not going to rest on our laurels, and whatever energy that we've been able to muster together and harness in this time is going to propel us forward. So that is what's been going on from a UKAbpsi perspective. We have been fed almost weekly by national offerings of webinars that have really kind of helped to enthuse us to do what we're doing today. And I'm sure it doesn't go unrecognized that the national president, Ethiopia Jackson, who's with us today, has been spearheading some of this work. Her heart and her soul is on her sleeve, and she has that to offer us. And we would be amiss if we didn't grab and take, not in a bad way, Ethiopia, we need to leave you with something, but we are so happy to have her at the head of this organization at the moment. Ooh. And I'm going to ask her now to come and share with us her interpretation of hope as we emerge out of COVID-19.
Wow.
Thank you.
Wow. Blessings, blessings. First and foremost, I'm going to ask my dear Baba and Nana Nobles if I do have permission to speak on. Hello, family. I am so honored to be with you in this moment and bring you greetings from all of UKAbpsi around the world, and particularly in the States. First and foremost, I appreciate what you said, my dear sister Michelle, because I would say to you, this is just as selfishly for me as I hope I can contribute it to others. In the midst of what's happening for us, the complexities of the pandemic worldwide that adds to the systemic oppression and murder of our people worldwide, we are sitting in a turbulent time. So for me to be here and look at the beauty of this Blackness is filling my spirit and soul and instilling in me not only the hope, but the capacity to keep getting up each morning. So I am at awe to be sitting as the president of the Association of Black Psychologists during this time, and also sitting side by side with our founders, particularly Dr. Nobles. Whatever we are accomplishing together. It's not so much under my leadership as much as it is under my capacity to follow what the membership needs and lead from that space, to allow for the richness and the depth of what's happening now. I was so excited to hear all that's been going on in the UK. And I want to always honor our dear Marie as the international regional rep, but each and every one of you. You have taken all of this and made it your own. You are UKAbpsi. You are further defining us and positioning us. And so I so appreciate you for that. Before we move on, I just want to add one other piece I want to share here, which is, it's heavy on my heart, the current murders that are going on in the States. And I know for a fact that that is a shared experience for people of African ancestry around this world. That there are so many who have been taken from us, named and unnamed. Someone else has justified the taking of them, the dehumanizing of us. So that this pandemic, as we sit here today, is not the only pandemic. It is one more. One more. I applaud our resilience and our courage to step into the use of technology like this to bring our forces closer together, to not let the geography divide us, to not let the pandemic divide us, but instead step into our rightful responsibility to lead all of humanity by using this to bring us together, to bear witness to one another, to speak truth to one another, and to anchor us in the Blackness of who we are. And I appreciate that Marie's going to speak more about that, but I love the opening. The Black psychologist is an intentionality, it's not a discipline. And I have greater folks who will speak to that. Within the Association of Black Psychology now, in response to Baba's request to Zola up on us, and he'll speak more to that, we have launched the Sawubona Healing Circles in our partnership with the Community Healing Network, where we birthed the Emotional Emancipation Circles. We have now launched the Mbutu Healing Circles. What we mean by this is that these virtual healing spaces are needed to stabilize our communities in the midst of the assault and the trauma that we're in right now. whereas the emotional emancipation circles allow for more ongoing support in the face of, we're in an acute state. And so we must respond in an acute state, an emergent state. And that's what these healing circles are. So I'm looking forward to us all collectively expanding those and positioning them the way they should be. And I just want to say thank you for letting me be here. And I'm looking forward to learning more from this call today to better understand how I can be of service to you, how UKAbpsi can be of service to you. What do you need from us? Blessings.
Blessings, Sister Theopia. Thank you so kindly for your input there, and a real important point to remind us about the shoulders of which we stand upon in order to take this work forward, and also to think about the blueprint that our ancestors clearly have left us in order to deal with the atrocities that we have to embark upon on a day-to-day basis. So reminding us that this is just actually, the pandemic is just another form of what we have to deal with and overcome is really beneficial to us now. And so it gives me absolute great pleasure for me to be able to introduce Dr. Vera Nobles, Mama Nobles, to share with us from her perspective as an educator and as an educator. And she's going to be sharing with us first, and then we'll be followed by Dr. Baba Nobles.
If we may, I want to just reverse that. I'm going to speak quickly first, and then let my wife and the better Dr. Nobles speak secondly. I wanted to make a couple of points. One is that about 7 days before the great word wizard Maya Angelou transition, she told us, if you quiet yourself, in that quietude, you will hear the voice of God. I want you to think about that, because if I quiet myself and I hear the voice of God, who am I? And I want to point out that this time of sheltering in place and being locked down is a time to be quiet and to listen to ourselves. And that's what I want to suggest that we do, because we should be thinking about the post-corona time, not being in this crisis. And at the post-corona times, what are we going to do? A lot of people, particularly those who you know are not our best friends, are talking about this new normal. And the new normal for them is really going to be the old normal, because they're showing themselves for what they are. But the new normal for us, I believe, has to be the old African way, put in modern language, the old African way. And that's what we were doing when we began to talk about this notion of Zola. This technology has given us a gift. It has shown the world that even though we were dropped off at different boat stops and different ports of call, and were told to be now English or be American or be Hispanic, this technology is showing us that we are just one people. If you cut off the voice, just look at this picture, you don't know where you are in the world. And I've had the pleasure of traveling the world to see us in all our beauty in different faces all over the world. We're the same folk. So I want to offer for a thought about the post-pandemic time and the global perspective, that we maybe embrace what I'm calling a moral mandate. And that moral mandate is to be three. To be three. The three is to be African, to be family, and to be awesome. To be three. To be African, to be family, to be African, to be awesome. So we get away from these national borders that make us believe that we're different. We are simply African. We are simply family, and we are simply awesome. And that is what will take us way beyond this pandemic. And we begin to look at that by rescuing, and I'm using this language intentionally. Language is important. Rescuing the language and the logic of our ancestors. One of that attempt by me was to rescue the notion of Zola. Zola is a Bantu word that was taught to us by Yafukiao, and Zola means love. And before we do the retrofitting back to our westernized training and think love only means we like each other and we have this emotional attachment and I want to be near you and I feel so good around you. Zola is physics. Zola is the way energy can transform the molecular structure of our anatomy, both in the visible time and in the invisible realm. So Zola is energy. It is energy that activates our self-healing potential. That's why we came with the idea of Zola up on us as a hashtag. If I Zola up on you, I am actually activating your molecular structure in your mind, in your body, in your soul to regenerate itself. And so we can begin to rescue these terms and these ideas from our own history, from our own normal. Then we can begin to talk about the ongoing international restoration of the wellness of African people where we find ourselves. And so that's what I want to suggest to you, that the new normal is our old normal. And part of that old normal is to rescue our language, rescue our logic into B3, to B3, to be African, to be family, and to be awesome. And with that, I will pass to my awesomeness, Dr. Vera Nobles.
Okay. Greetings. I would like to discuss Zola as spoken medicine. Mipova Nkizi. It's from the Congo, and it's a petition or a call to command to heal. And as spoken medicine, it activates the heal, to heal or to cure. And Zola up on us is a petition or a call command for us to activate our own self-healing potential. So allow me to quickly discuss Zola with one of the 5 stars in the Family Enhancement Plan. I'm going to talk about reframe, to recast the various directives, orders to shelter in place according to our way. One example is, one way is to lift up is the power of the word in spoken medicine. As I repeat, Mipova Nkizi. It means how to activate. How do we activate the power to heal? So I know self-healing potential is in me. I am telling you to be activated. Come from the visible, come from the invisible to the visible. Come, I want you to come. I want you to come. Come activate. I am not mind. I am not body. I am the Simbi, a divinely powered being. I am God in me. I am health in me. I am the healing power in me. I am love. I am what I am, the divine in me. And that encompasses all of us. It's the divine that's in us. God is in us. And health is in us, and the healing power in us. And we are love. Okay, and finally, another powerful one is Buka Mukati, Yabuka Kumbazi, which means the spirit within me heal the inside, and I or we will heal the outside. So Buka Mukati, Yabuka Kumbazi. Would you just try it with me?
Open up your mics and say it together.
Yes.
Everybody. Buka Mukati.
Yabuka Kumbazi.
Yabuka Kumbazi. You can feel it. We want the African world to feel that energy that is ours. We've been beat down so much that we think we have nothing. But all we got to do is look at each other and say, Zola up on you, baby. Look at each other and say, Buka Mukati, Yabuka Kumbazi. that almost frightens us. We ain't used to it, but the power's there. And that's what we believe we need to go into the post-corona time with our stuff, with our juju. Make it work.
Thank you so kindly. And I'm just going to kind of just leave us up this way just for a moment, because there are some real nuggets that you have shared with us in that presentation, and something about the physics and recognizing what you were sharing with us, Baba Wade, is really, really important. And I wrote down the 2B3, African, family, and awesome. And, you know, if that isn't a battle cry, I don't know what is. To be family, to be African, family, and to be awesome. And so we're really looking forward about what more is going to come from that you're going to be sharing with us. And Mama, when you shared about the spoken word as medicine,
Yes.
you know, we are by nature orators. We are by nature storytellers. We are by nature prophets and wise ones. And so using the words that we have medicinally to heal is you know, something that is more powerful, I think, that we actually recognize. So thank you, both of you, for bringing that.
If I can make a quick footnote, mama's mouth is the most powerful. The feminine is the most powerful for all of us. And so we should recognize that, begin to not get caught up in their little gender fights and gender confusion. Mama's mouth is the most powerful. And if we give honor and homage to where our energy lies, we can do what? Buka Mukati. Yeah, Buka Kumbaya. We can Zola up on each other.
Zola up on each other. Thank you so kindly. So for all the children out there, remember what Baba Wade said about mama's mouth being the one. So thank you kindly for that, Baba Wade. And so now I'm going to invite Professor Andrews to come and share with us. And before I do that, I just want to acknowledge the achievements of you being the person to establish the first Black Studies BA and now MA in Europe. Just going to put it back on so that everybody can see us for a moment. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that, because when one person succeeds, we all succeed. When one of us moves forward, we all move forward. So acknowledging you today is really important. And I just want to thank you, particularly for all the support that you give to the Association of Black Psychologists, yourself and Dr. Deon. We know we've walked this journey together and through the trials and tribulations that we've had hosting our conferences, but you know, you stuck by it, and I just really want to thank you, both of you. Thank you both for that. And so without further ado, I want to invite Dr. Andrews to speak to us about how are we going to help our communities to emerge from the UK's perspective. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. Thanks for the invitation to speak, and also thanks for the thanks around Black Studies. Certainly wasn't just me. Dr. Deon Taylor's here as well. Has been really influential, and actually the students, and there's a lot of people who've been involved in putting everything together as well. And it's a good time, and like I said, we do have a new MA, which we're actually going to launch in September 2021 now as well. COVID has had a lot of implications for a lot of things. I wanted to speak, and it also is good to help Black psychology. I've talked about before, actually the reason that I'm in the job that I'm in and pursued academia at all was going to the States. I was fortunate enough to go to America in the third year of my degree. And I went and I found Black psychology. Lucky enough to meet the great Bill Cross. I met Janet Helms. I met and just found this whole discipline that in the UK we just don't have. Like, it's just not. Psychology here in the university just doesn't kind of, you know how, well, if you're in the UK, you know how it is. If you're not, the UK is the bastion, the home of whiteness and eliteness and elite privilege. And we're really not in many courses, and certainly not psychology. So Black psychology really is why I carried on in university and got to the point I am now. So we're always really happy to help out and lend our support to UKAbpsi as well. I mean, I was asked today to talk about hope, and I'll be honest, it's a bit difficult sometimes. I've spent a lot of this day talking to various outlets about what's happening in the States right now with the killing of George Floyd and all of the tension that is mounted and the rebellions that are in the streets. And, you know, we see that, and we see the killings of brothers and sisters in America, and we also have to remember the sisters as well. Deon Taylor was also recently killed by the police. And that isn't something which is distant to us. That is something which is very much part of our experience. You know, if you're Black in the UK, you're about 3 times more likely to be killed by the police in suspicious circumstances. And that death by restraint is how it usually happens in the UK because the police don't carry guns. So when we see that, when we see these kind of, this is trauma for us, you know, and it's bringing up a lot of trauma for people here. And it really is quite emotional and quite distressing. That on top of everything else that's been going on, all the stuff about COVID, and really the obvious statistics that it's hurt us more than it's hurt the general population. And one of the truest facts you're going to find in health inequality in the UK or in America or anywhere else is that there's a clear ethnic penalty, and the hierarchy of race with Black people at the bottom and white people at the top is really, really just magnified in health. So it's not really a surprise that we're dying more, catching it more, and particularly in the NHS, which is as great as the National Health Service is, it is a deeply colonial institution which has exploited Black and brown workers for a very, very, very long time. So none of this is a surprise. Actually, I'm going to get to the hope part, believe me. But I say it's difficult because when you see all of this stuff, you realize what the stakes are for us. You know, racism isn't like something which just a few white people have in their minds that you can educate out. Racism is in the DNA of the system. It is what makes a system tick. And that's why we keep seeing the same basic things happen again and again and again and again and again. So for all of the progress that we do make, we're still in a terrible position, right? The system is still as racist as it ever was. So, and then Franz Fanon talked about this idea of the zone of non-being, that to be Black is to find yourself in this zone of non-being, where the whole premise of us being here is that we're not human, right? That's why we were brought in chains to the Caribbean and to the Americas. That's why you still see that we can be murdered on video and there be a debate about whether it's murder. That's why that's why everything plays out today for that basic truth and that basic premise that our life does not matter as much anywhere around the world. So that's this kind of zone of non-being. So in many ways, having this conversation about hope, it feels sometimes like we're post-hope, we're beyond hope. Where is the hope? The truth and the fundamental truth is that within this political and economic system, which is based on the fact that our lives have value, there really is very little hope. But, and this is the big but that I wanted to get to, because what we often tend to do is we tend to spend far too much time thinking about how we are viewed from the outside and not thinking about how we view ourselves, right? So if we view ourselves through the eyes of this society, then you've already lost, because the whole ourselves through this society is we are less than human, and that will always be the case through this society. And that's a problem that often gets us in trouble, because we tend to do that. We tend to focus on how we are viewed, and how we deal with how we are viewed, right? And that leads to the kind of situation where, you know, we are far more likely to end up in secure mental health services, those kind of things, because we struggle with the way that we are viewed by this society, and this society literally hates us, right? So what we have to do, and this is where Black psychology really comes into it, is we have to flip the way that we understand ourselves, flip our vision, stop looking through the eyes of a society that hates you and start looking through our own eyes. And that really is where the hope is. And that's really, in all ways, where the hope is. So we think about something like Blackness, the concept of Blackness. That's not something which comes from outside upon us. Had so many conversations recently, mostly with white people, I'll be honest, where there is this kind of assumption that, well, look, if you think of yourself as being different, then that's the problem. No, that's not the problem, right? The problem is understanding that difference through the eyes of this society. We understand that difference through the way that we've understood that difference historically. We understand that Blackness is not a burden, it's a responsibility, right? The fact that we look the way we are, that now my hair is growing because I can't go to the barbers, I can see it really clearly, that connects us to each other. And that connection to each other is really important, and it's really powerful. And yes, we are oppressed in this society. But it's when we come together and through that journey together and our struggles for survival that we find meaning in ourselves. And that's really what Blackness has always been about. And there's a reason why we have survived, even though we've gone through all of this trauma. And that's the other thing. I mean, what we're experiencing now is no worse or better than what we've experienced previously. Our whole basis of our experience in the West here has been struggle. Literally the struggle to survive. But that is not something which has ever broken us. That has always been something which has brought us together, made us stronger, and made us proud of it. So when we see all this trauma and this this devastation that's happening around us, we need to understand that we draw our strength from our ability to come together and to come through. That has happened in the past, and it will certainly happen today. When you think about Blackness as this thing that we have to embrace, that we have to understand it's us, that we have to really use to mobilize us. That's where Black psychology is really important. So the keynote of the UKAbpsi conference that was held at Birmingham City University, that was last year now, I think. Lockdowns messed with my time, but I believe it was last year. And we were lucky enough to have Professor William Cross, who talked about this Negro to Black conversion experience. This is one of the most powerful things I've ever read. Not because it was new when I read it, but because it took something that was quite activist, quite radical, and put it into his kind of academic language. This is why I stayed in university, because prior to reading this, I'd never seen anything like it. After reading this, it was like, okay, maybe you can translate some of this stuff. And the Negro to Black conversion experience is really important, because often when we think about Blackness and we think about where we're going forward and we think about what we can do, there is this idea that if we're trying to embrace us, then what we're trying to do is to embrace, we have to all be the same. Like, we have the sameness culturally, linguistically, we all need to be the same. And that's never been the case. We've never always been the same. We've always been hugely different. If you go to the African continent, probably more diverse in terms of language, culture than anywhere else. The point about sameness that you get from the idea of Negro to Black conversion experiences isn't sameness in how we dress, act, talk, think. It's sameness in what is our political objective. How do we see ourselves and how do we see where we're going? So what Cross talks about is, the Negro as a category is that's a Black person who hasn't really ever engaged in thinking about Blackness, right? So this could be different ways, right? This could be the kind of middle class, has a good job, doesn't think racism exists. We know too many of those people. Or it could be the hustler on the street. Actually, Malcolm X, perfect example of this, right? Hustler out there doing badness, ain't really thinking about things, just gets through life. So both of them are surviving, both of them not really thinking about race too much, and not really engaging in the struggle, right? And then something happens. And this is where what's happening now is really important to how we think about moving forward and think about hope, right? So Cross says, you got people who are kind of in this, not thinking about it, not thinking about struggle, just getting on with things. And then there's an encounter, right? So something happens. And that thing happens, and that thing means you can no longer ignore thinking about your Blackness. And then what could be a better experience than watching George Floyd be literally murdered by the police, right? That's something where if you never thought about racism before and you watch that, you have to. Well, you don't have to, but you would think on some level spiritually as a Black person, you're gonna understand what the stakes are and what that means for you. And so those kind of encounters are really important because they turn us on to thinking about the thing that we need to be thinking about. And it's that kind of thing which flips the script in many ways. So if you think about the Black Panther Party, actually both in America and here, wasn't really it wasn't really as popular until Martin Luther King got killed. Because Martin Luther King's death sparked everybody. It was the encounter that made you think, wow, the person, the non-violent person was done by violence. And it turned us on and made us think in a different way. And so that's what the opportunities we have today. All this madness is happening. Is an opportunity to make us think in the ways that we need to be thinking about, right? And once you have that encounter, then you immerse yourself in Blackness, you start to learn about Blackness, you start to think about Blackness, and eventually, before all of you come to the end where the Black conversion is when we understand where we are in the system, we understand what we have to do, we have a political commitment to each other to bring each other up. And that is what and if we don't have that, we literally have nothing. If we don't have that belief and that international belief as well, because everything that's happening here is connected to everything that's happening everywhere else. We don't have that belief and that connection and and that commitment to each other, the rest of it is gone. And as bad as all the things that have happened and all the things you can point to, they're actually, strangely enough, an opportunity for us to refocus, recommit, and to bring people into the struggle who wouldn't ordinarily be in the struggle. This is the perfect time to bring people into the struggle, because now it's on everybody's agenda and it's on everybody's mind. And so I'm going to end my little section on thinking about my absolute favorite person from history, politics, etc., Malcolm X, where he says, and this is 50 years ago, if you're Black, you should be thinking Black. And if you're not thinking Black at this late stage, then I'm sorry for you. And if it was relevant then, it's even more relevant now. And I think that's the power of Black psychology, and that's the power of where we can draw our strength from today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kinda. That was awesome. And again, lots for us to think about, lots for us to take on board. But one of the things that you mentioned that I think is really important to draw out is the fact that we cannot overlook the trauma that we experience on a day-to-day basis. And going back to something that Baba Wade was sharing earlier, you know, if one of us is hurting, we are all hurting. How is it possible? And there is an African proverb that says, you know, if you are not well, I cannot be well. If you are hurting, I am hurting. And so we absolutely have an opportunity in this moment of physical distancing to really kind of drill down into asking us the question, who are we? Who am I? Am I connected to my brothers? Am I connected to my sisters? Am I experiencing the things that they are experiencing? What am I doing? How am I serving? And I think that's something for us all to kind of take on board, because if we don't do that, it's very easy, as you said, to kind of feel helpless in the global scheme of things if we are viewing what is going on through Eurocentric eyes. But actually, if we are willing to kind of go back, as Baba Wade shared, to what is the old normal, bringing it into the 21st century as our new normal, then, you know, we have an opportunity. There is the hope for us to be able to emerge from this collectively. So thank you kindly for that. Thank you kindly for that. Kindly. Okay, so we're going to move on now to talking to two presenters from the from ADPAC. We're going to start with Michelle. Sorry, I beg your pardon. We're going to start with Maxine, and we're going to listen to both of them. So they're just going to go one after the other. And so, Maxine, I'm going to ask you to come to the mic first.
Okay, thank you, and greetings, family. Thank you for the invite. It's really interesting just listening to what Professor Andrews was saying, and it really does resonate, particularly in terms of politics. And when you asked me to speak, and obviously on the subject of hope, immediately I started to think of actually, we can use politics as a catalyst for change whilst we sit and we reflect and reset. And just by way of almost starting this conversation, I attended a webinar by my niece this afternoon on financial planning. And she started with this quote, and I just thought it so summed up who we are and where we are as a people. And what she actually said is, if you don't have a plan for your life, you'll become part of a plan for someone else's life. When you think of that, we think of us as a community, let's consider what that means. If we don't have a plan for our community, we then become part of a plan for someone else's community. And actually, I think that's what's been happening. So this is a real opportunity for us to sit, reflect, and hope. And what I want to do very quickly is really to debunk some of these myths that we hold about politics. As soon as I say politics, people's eyes roll. I don't want to have that conversation. It's not for us. I'm not part of the system. It doesn't make any difference, etc., etc., etc. I'm absolutely clear. Politics is an intrinsic part of who we are and what we do. And at this particular time, when we think about it, being Black is a political act. Just existing as Black is a political act. And we really do need to think about that when we think of politics and what that means. And also, I think what's been happening is that there's been almost a confusion about what's politics, what's democracy, what's governance, and sort of a mishmash. And actually, they're different things. For me, democracy, and for us as a people, democracy is a fundamental human right. It's not a civil liberty. We demand civil liberties, but actually, politics for me is how we structure our democracy so that we can demand our fundamental human rights. So it does feel a little bit as though we've been sleepwalking and we've been sort of existing in almost a false paradigm of what we consider to be politics and what's actually politics. And in recent times, politics or puppetry, take your choice. And just look at that. And it's not just local, it's regional, it's national, it's international, and it's global. So what exactly is politics and what does it mean for us as people of the African diaspora? And Dr. Erica McInnes, I attended one of her courses, and she broke down actually looking at the world and the meaning of life from a Eurocentric as opposed to an African-centered perspective. And so when we look at some of these principles in terms of Eurocentric thinking, materialism, the biggest house, the biggest car, the fashion labels, quantification, if it doesn't count, it doesn't exist, the highest value placed in objects, acquisitions. And then when you look at it actually from an African-centered perspective, and this is where we're going in terms of political governance, it's actually about knowing yourself, it's actually about improving relationships across the community with our creator, working very much on intuition, spirit, energy, valuing relationships. So actually, once we step away from these Eurocentric principles, then what we have is actually starting to structure our communities around African-centered values and African-centered politics. So actually, when we speak of self-determination, we're speaking of politics. We speak of education. When we send our children into the education system, that's a political act. When we think of mental health services, community services, just going into the workplace, when we think of economics, all of this is political. So the question I'd ask is, well, how can we purport to be self-determined people if we're not political? If we're not wielding any sort of power, if we have no systems of governance of our own, how can we control our own purse strings? How can we control our own destiny? So for me, the whole thing about politics is about having the strategy, having the infrastructure, having the design teams, having self-sustaining principles, and planning for the future, whilst learning from the past. So I think the space that we're in is that we have the opportunity now to think about how we do that, how we build on that, how we build on the principles of African-centeredness that has already been spoken about, and how do we use that for the elevation of our community, and actually looking at that from our own principles as opposed to the capitalistic principles that's actually, sort of almost been indoctrinated in us. So in terms of politics, in terms of hope, in terms of African-centeredness, this is a time of hope. And actually, this is a time for change.
That's great. Thank you kindly, Maxine, and thank you for sharing with us and how we emerge through solution building and politics. And I know that Dean is going to continue that conversation. So I'm going to hand straight over to you, Dean, to continue that with us.
Good evening, Uhuru family. I listen with keen ears to what everybody is saying about not being enthusiastic. And I'm grateful to our ancestors for protecting me from the cynicism that is very easy for us to build through our lived experience, because I made a very clear decision early on this path of creating structure to surround myself with the contributors as opposed to the beneficiaries. And a lot of those contributors are visionary leaders. And although we have the operational leaders, I spend to have longer conversations with the visionary leaders. And I'm blessed on several fronts with my close brother, Nana Ajiman in Access UK, where we talk about building of the careers and sustainable employment for young people. In ADPAC with our head of education, talking about a curriculum that we have in the Diamond Enterprise curriculum, which is entrepreneurial and African-centered. So everything that we're talking about is in informing an African lens and creating an African lens. And that is about extrapolating everybody from your central consciousness. The minute we fall in love with the silence, as Dr. Baba said, just making yourself quiet enough to hear God, and then hearing the God inside yourself, everything else dissolves away and it delivers an equilibrium. Now, once you start to realize that cultural self-esteem, you want to infect everybody else. And the conversations around politics, the art of good politics, is just getting stuff done. It's about demystifying every single concept that we have, that we are so separated from by academics. Let's take the intellectual masturbation out of it and make it very practical and bring it home. It is the mind of Sankofa and the 25 years of work that you guys have put into it. And I always say to the younger guys that I work with at 45 is, I'm an old man for counsel to you who's a young man for war. And I look to my elders to gain that wisdom and take from those that know and pass on to those that don't. And in very simple terms, that is the role of ADPAC. ADPAC is about 21st century Garveyism and delivering digital tool sets to all of our grassroots organizations who can tap into that. And that allows us to map our people so that we know exactly what benefit we are to us, first and foremost, and then we know what benefit we are to every single nation we're in, because we can quantify it. So for instance, we are doing an eligible voter census right now so that we know by borough and by county our voter influence on any election. So when we can quantify that, that's leverage. How do we encapsulate our future in how amazing all of our minds are? We take the legacy from rites of passage organizations and we inherit all of those young men and all of those young ladies. And the reason I mention rites of passage is because it's something that should be universally adopted by African diaspora people for the purposes of delivering our children a high cultural self-esteem. When they have that high cultural self-esteem, they have an ethnic pride that, irrespective of racism or anybody else, can't be challenged. And then what do we have? We have a common code of conduct and practice. Code is what is missing. So within a partnership of ADPAC and Access UK, we have a management leadership program called Manage. Now, the pilot is for 20 young men, where we have a 6-week course to teach them cognitive problem solving skills, debate. We have martial arts in there, but in it being a holistic program, we've also got Tai Chi meditation so that we can start to unearth their leadership qualities, but also inform them in a very structured leadership program. The second part of that is a 12-week unearthing of purpose, which is a one-to-one session coaching. And then the last part is a mastermind training, which again is 6 weeks. So in that very structured, managed program, those leaders who we hope after the pilot to produce 100 a year can go out and infect local authority, parliament, the NHS, and all of the institutions that we work within, because we do infect every single institution in this country, but with an African lens. Now, the beauty of this program is it's created for 10 young men or 10 young women respectively to work as an alumni when they graduate. So they are their own leadership support system. You think about that, it gives me comfort. So when I think about the disgusting murder of our brother and cousin in the United States, I also think about the NFAC, who are a highly disciplined, highly trained, ex-military African diaspora militia, who I concur with being highly armed, because they are the protection that we need. So when you see a base who can train us and think if Europeans can have a Blackwater as a private security solution, so can we, in trust that lies outside of national legislation in common law. So as we start to infect each other with ideas based on a leadership that we grow out, we call it succession plan. And we've been very poor at creating succession plan because we tend to hold it in our own cerebellums. And I've been as guilty of it as anybody else. So although this realignment, which is more than just whatever Europeans or Chinese have put into the consciousness to create this invisible bogeyman, that let's not make any mistake, we're not on lockdown, in self-isolation. And in having clarity about being in self-isolation, we take control of what we can take control of. So I've taken control of what I can do. And where I would normally be in my retail outlet, and this service provision would be a hobby, and I'm running from my shop to meetings, I now spend from 10 a.m. in my routine to 5 p.m. at my desk, working on this, having meetings with service providers. And it's beautiful because the conversations we have are so creative, and it's a component that we don't speak on, and it's actually our biggest attribute, which is our spirit. And everybody that I'm speaking to is infected by the ancestors. And the beauty of that is that when we connect, there's no resistance. We're pushing on open doors. And I find what happens is a quickening where we tend to attract our tribe. And the beauty of attracting your tribe is it starts to swell. And that groundswell, again, makes me very confident that we don't need the sky to turn lilac for all African people to turn in one direction and say, now we must unite. It just has to be a critical mass of enough of us who are doing different work towards the same ends, complementing each other and communicating with each other. So I thank the ABSI for inviting me onto the platform. I thank my sister and colleague Maxine specifically for inviting me. I really am blessed to be an esteemed company, and I look forward to working with you guys through AdPac, and I appreciate your consideration for letting me on the panel. Thank you. Ashe. And Uhuru, most importantly.
Uhuru, thank you, Ashe. I'm just going to switch to the gallery just for a second, because there was some really, again, just poignant things that you shared with us, Dean. And, you know, I just wanted to share a little bit about my connection with Maxine in relation to, you know, we have lots of conversations, and one of the things I've always been telling her is, oh, don't tell me about politics. I don't do politics. But, you know, her ability to kind of get you to think about what you are actually doing has left me realizing everything that I do has something to do with politics. The way I raise my children, the work I do, everything has something to do with politics. So I want to really thank you both, and Michelle and I are really looking forward to the joint work that we're going to be doing with ADPAC and moving that agenda forward, and that element within the Association of Black Psychologists that I know that you guys are going to be feeding into. So thank you so kindly for that, Dean and Maxine. And so now we're going to move on to Dr. Deon Taylor, who is going to be sharing with us how we are going to support our women to emerge. Deon, we absolutely know it's been on the news that we have had an increase in terms of the challenges for our Black women during this time, and even in with some of the challenges, also hearing some of the real positive experiences that some of our women have been going through because they've been given the time. So I'm just going to hand over to you to take us through this next part of how we support our African women to emerge. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you and greetings to everyone. Hope everyone's having a good day and good evening. Hope you can hear me. I'm on an iPad. So I just wanted to talk through some of the things that the topic of, I suppose, women. Again, it's one of those that has been a mother, being a daughter, being an aunt. These things really, you start to think, well, in actual fact, what can I say? So here's what I'm going to say. So in public, social, and as Maxine pointed out, political spaces, Black women's bodies, minds, intellects, and very being have historically and continue to this very day to be deemed as often inadequate, irrelevant, and limited to many mainstream stereotypes and narratives. And I want to talk a little bit about how we can change those narratives, how those narratives are continuing to change in this COVID scenario that we're in. So rather than being labeled as being welfare or state or benefit recipients and being lazy, or being seen as being unintellectual or ugly or deemed as unattractive or hypersexualized. Another narrative as well, which a lot of Black women fulfill, is the superwoman discourse. And I think it's important for us to think about how many of these discourses do actually malign us in many ways, in terms of they're not necessarily our true experiences. And in actual fact, we are a lot more dynamic and there's much more about us. And when we try to fulfill these narratives, which are very Eurocentric, they are damaging to our very beings. So, and they're not necessarily reflective of our true experiences. So given the context of how we find ourselves in these new spaces, how are we developing ourselves as active agents, as finding, you know, as I said, as a mother myself to an 11-year-old, the kind of the conversations, the care and responsibility is shifted, but it's in a positive way. And to me, that has that aspect and the ability to nurture, not just go from one space to the other so quickly, school, home, you know, extracurricular activities. This has allowed a new space, and this has been welcoming. So I think that for Black women in particular, we can be active in our minds, bodies, intellects, as I said, because we are constantly pitted against the kind of Eurocentric standards of respectability, acceptability and decency. And this often means that we have to, especially in the spaces going into where I work in higher education, you have to feel like you put on a facade all of the time. A little antidote is, I was speaking to a colleague, and she said that her hair was wrapped, and she came on to a meeting, and someone said, "Oh, you look different. You don't look. Are you sure that you're ready for this meeting?" And she said she unfortunately she switched her camera off. And to me, that is again something that we I think we should, if there's anything that we take from any of the lessons that we're trying to learn, is that we're in our homes, we're in our spaces, we do not have to conform. This is our time to reclaim back our being without being subjected to particular standards that we are constantly governed against. Because these things, as we know, are damaging. And I just want to emphasize to people that we are enough, we are beautiful enough, we are intellectual enough, and we are doing enough. Because I think sometimes we think that we aren't doing enough, or we aren't enough generally. Our very being is. Boyd Franklin says that many Black women in group psychotherapy report that they experience great internal and external pressure to disprove negative stereotypes, even at risk to their mental health. And I do think this is something that sometimes when we're trying to work against who we are and our own kind of individual subjectivities, what we think is right, listening to our intuition, that is damaging. And I would encourage people to not do so, to actually use this time to embrace who you are, enjoy your families, enjoy what you have, because there is so much negativity, but those small moments that we can have, we should be embracing them. So what strategies can we draw to kind of challenge the counter narratives and build up our esteem, and to know that, again, as I'll emphasize, we are enough? Well, I think we should draw on our skills, our natural skills of survival. And these are things that we've had and we use them, and often within education, we're told that our students need to be resilient. And I find that problematic. But I would say going back to looking out for each other is really important, to listening to what our elders say and do, and listening to and sharing our experiences with our parents, our mothers, our fathers, our grandparents, our teachers, our community leaders, our colleagues. We can learn so much. So I would encourage people to have and create these spaces, that the spaces are going to look different, they are going to feel different, but that's okay. That it's not going to, anyone that thinks that we're going back to a space that is going to be normal, quote unquote, is going to have a shock. I think we need to embrace what we do best, and what we do best is we share, we communicate. Even this space is empowering, but it also means that we're building up new types of communities. I personally have a problem with when people say Black community as it's almost like a homogenous entity. We are different communities, but we can group together and we can mobilize to actually challenge and support and refute the stereotypes and the kind of marginalization that we have. And as women, we should be using this space where we can, and in the whatever that space looks like, to embrace self-care, and that can be different things. That can be a moment, that could be just kind of reading. You know, as I said, my daughter takes up a lot of space, but then she's also creating her own space. And I do think, but the conversations that I'm building, to me, that is absolutely vital. That is, I'll never get that time back again, because as children move from, she's 11, so she's going to move into kind of like a new transition. She's not going to want to have that many conversations with me, but I do feel as though we could, this time, we're never going to get this back, so we should utilize it in the best way possible. So I'll stop there.
Okay, that is absolutely great. Thank you, Deon, for that. And I know that I've had the privilege of sitting and talking with you on numerous occasions, particularly about the portrayal of our young girls, and just really going to, or more, I should say, you know, the work that you're doing and the lengths that you go to be able to bring a different narrative, particularly into that university space that can at times be quite toxic, and having somewhere for even yourself to go to be able to get the support is so important. And the work that you're doing to support us to bring the emotional emancipation circles into the university as well is just going to be key for the sustaining of our sanity in those spaces. So thank you so kindly for that, Deon, for sharing. Just want to let those on Facebook know that we will be having a question and answer session coming up shortly. So please do send in your questions for any of our esteemed presenters, and Malcolm will be coming on a little bit later to field some of those questions that you send in. Thank you again, Dr. Deon Taylor, for sharing that with us. And so in the same vein, Vivid, that your specialism is with men, please share with us how we are going to assist our brothers and our men to emerge during this season. I'm going to hand over to you, Viv Ammon, now. Thank you.
Thank you, sister. Thank you so much. I've been sitting here thinking about what I'm going to say. I hadn't planned, because for me, it's a revisiting with family after many years, after many decades, too many decades. I'm not going to qualify specifically. Sister Ra Marie, very powerful, dynamic, uncontrollable sister. And Malcolm Phillips, take me back quite some time to those early days when we were, grappling with this new knowledge and seeking to craft it into something that makes sense for us in this particular environment, on this particular plantation. I remember when Uncle Wade Nobles came to Stoke Newington to speak, and whilst I was over there, cobbled together a book called Standing in the River, which is extremely powerful and set me on an emotional, spiritual, and psychological course that's kept me strong and focused up to this day. So the reconnecting is a very powerful one. And sitting down, watching him on screen with his beautiful wife and the knowledge that they've acquired over these years, on top of the knowledge of the ancestors, reminds me of Dr. Naim Akbar, Uncle Naim Akbar, whom I spent so much time with, who again, for me, had the particular gift of talking to our young people, particularly our young men, producing books that were easily accessible in a language that they could understand and embrace, and that they felt spoke specifically to the madness that they were experiencing. Yesterday, Dr. Sister Ra Marie made reference to the community of self. And when I first embraced that model, that concept, it's almost as though it set me free, because it allowed me to begin to organize all the different personalities in my head conflicting and beginning to get them to reason with each other and come up with a collective way forwards. And I think for many of our young men nowadays, it's that kind of fresh thinking delivered to them in a common sense language that they just don't get access to. There isn't a community of self in their heads. There is a disunity of self. Dr. Naim Akbar also spoke about self-alienation syndrome. I remember specifically one example he would give of the black man walking down the road, one white man after another walking past him and paying no attention to him. And then he could see way off in the distance, another black man coming, and his heart rate would go up. And he'd start to think about whether this individual was someone he would have to address, and I mean physically and violently, whether this individual was going to attack him. And so the trauma that seeing another black man would create in him, the self-alienation syndrome, such as the self-hate and the denial of self they experienced. It brings me to where we are today, that
we lost our sound. We're not hearing anybody.
Our young people feel completely disconnected from those who speak in leadership positions. Too often they see these leaders speaking from a position of authority about how things should be done and how we should behave, but not seeing those leaders behaving in that way. The research bears that out, and their experience bears that out. I really, really do think, and you know, I've been around a long time, there are not many movements that I haven't been associated with from a Pan-Africanist perspective, and great influential individuals I haven't had an opportunity to be around in the last 40 years or so. But there is a reoccurring issue that we should all face up to and acknowledge if we're to change things in this 21st century, which is that we really have to look to self first as individuals that are here and hyper exposed to our young. They're not as ignorant as they were before. They have access to the same information and knowledge that we have. And they look at us and they find that we're left wanting. So I say all of that because I really want to get into what the organization that I'm a part of, Black Socks, is really, really focused on. It's not interested in delivering any services. There are many, many individuals and organizations out there delivering services, excellent services already. We're interested in facilitating, brokering, and connecting organizations and individuals together so that we can work in a truly unified way. It's one of the key things. When we talk about the extent to which we were dispersed through the diaspora, it's critically important that we realize that we're not unified now. We're still fragmented. We're still disunified. There is still rampant self-hate in our community. Just because you may see it playing out in relation to our young people, that does not mean it doesn't exist in our elders. They're drawing it from us. The beautiful thing I love about Black psychology, and it was what was reinforced in me by Uncle Naim Akbar, is this whole idea of looking to self and not concerning yourself with them. They're not the problem. We're our problem. We sum it up as this whole idea of ethical leadership. Ethical leadership. That means continuing the work on yourself on an ongoing basis, acknowledging that you're work in progress and sharing that with the individuals that you're engaging with, making sure that they understand that the process is one that you're going through with them, not a process that you've been through and completed and are now taking them through. That's done. It's finished. We're global Africans. I remember when Paula Binner held the events in Manchester, Education of the Black Child. That was a real pilgrimage for those of us back in the day, being able to come together and be unified and feel that energy. We're global Africans. No, I'm here in the UK at the moment. I'm just on the plantation. It's not my country. It's not my politics. There's no such thing as democracy, not what they define it as. We had an event last Sunday, and it was a global African event across 4 continents. And it was uplifting for us to share for a brief moment. But we're in no doubt, we're not confused by the fact that the mountain that we need to climb is not one that we can reach to the top of in our lifetime. So for ethical leadership's sake, we must just do our little bit to focus on making sure that we're bringing each other together, we're brokering the relationships, we're being seen to do that. We're not being selfish about our individual organizations and what our organization does and how many members we got and how great our program is. We have to be done with that. So the event that we had last Sunday was just about us connecting with other networks and say, well, where can we work together? Where do our different approaches complement? I spend more time on the continent than I do in the UK. People don't know that because I'm not publicizing it. I'm not promoting it. They're not seeing me in some bar in Kampala or on the beach. You know, I'm getting on and doing the work and brokering those relationships because that's what it's required.
I'm not sure what's happened there, but it's okay. Sorry about
2
that.
minutes.
You're back on, please continue.
Let me just bring this into the harbour very quickly, very, very quickly. When I'm on the African continent, we're talking about the 200 to 500 year plan. We're talking about the unification of the continent. We're talking about free trade. We're not talking about the kind of stuff to do with blackness that takes place, or we spend too much of our time talking about in the UK and in America. It's a fixation, and I believe it's a part of the disease. So I'm going to end really my controlled rant by saying, let's, and I'm appealing to the young people out there because I want them to see the fact that we're not the completed article, right? That we want to share what we've learned so far with you, the leadership programs that we're running, or Dean's running, or Ramarie, Malcolm, and all the rest are delivering. You know, these are works in progress. They're not completed. And we will learn from you if you're involved in these programs and these processes. There are 2 networks that we've established out of Black Socks because its role is to facilitate other networks that look like it, that understand the importance of this coming together. One is called Black Men for Change, and it has 60 Black male influencers. It's London focused at the moment, but looking at doing work more widely so it can collaborate around organizational and service development, both in the UK and abroad. And then Omar, which is a mental health network that's interested in doing the same thing. It doesn't deliver services, it's only interested in working with individuals in a leadership role and brokering relationships between organizations. It's critically important that we function in that way, not in a nation state orientated way, but globally. So I'll stop there and I'll say once again, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to be amongst you this evening.
Viv, thank you so kindly for sharing so passionately there with us. And I can't remember if it was on your show last week or because I've listened into quite a few webinars and Zooms over since the lockdown. So forgive me if I get this wrong, but I'm sure there was a gentleman on your, there was a brother on your show who quoted a song by the name, I think his name is Errol Dunkley. And the song is Every Man Does Their Thing a Little Way Different. The things I do, I may do it in a different way from you. And that really kind of encapsulates the fact that, yes, we may all be doing things a little way different, but as long as we're all doing it to the common purpose of self and the upliftment of self, thereby uplifting our families and thereby uplifting our communities and globally, then let's continue to do our thing a little way different. Thank you so kindly, Ray, for sharing and being part of this, this webinar series with us. So now I'm just going to switch the camera over to gallery a little for just a moment so everybody can kind of just still see all of our esteemed presenters. And now we're going to have Yukila, who's going to bring a spoken word to us. So Yukila is the balm to our conversation as she brings us as she brings her piece to us. And I just want to thank her again because Yukila supported us at our conference. She's a volunteer for the Association of Black Psychologists. And this is also something to encourage some of the other young people as well that are either students on kind of Deon's course or the students that have the privilege of going through Patty Gift and other organizations, that you need to be part of what we are doing. You absolutely need to be part of what you're doing because Viv, you're absolutely right. I think even at 52, I think I feel a little bit old for doing some of the work that I'm doing. But, you know, the youngers have got to come up because they are part of the solution. They're absolutely part of the solution. So again, Malcolm's going to be putting our details on the Facebook that people can connect with us. Please remember, we're going to have some Q&A session shortly. Keep your questions coming in. And Yukila, beloved, I'm going to hand straight over to you now.
Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me, first of all, to speak. When I spoke to Clancy, she said, oh, you know, do some spoken word, and I'm like, you know, because I like to move through a very unapologetic stance. And when I was speaking to my friends and my sister who lives in the States, I was saying, what am I going to say about COVID? How am I feeling? And people couldn't focus. I couldn't focus because everything that's happening and with all the deaths and the trauma and feeling tired and relentless. So I wanted to start from this position, coming from a place where we're acknowledging the past, we're acknowledging the present, and that how we can validate our feelings of feeling fed up and how we can look forward to the future. I can't breathe, in the words of George Floyd. Staying at home doesn't mean you're safe, we learned from Deon Taylor. Running in your neighborhood can get you killed, Ahmaud Arbery. You see, I'm sick and tired of wishful thinking. I'm sick and tired of hearing that our people are falling. I'm sick and tired of speaking words without action. I'm sick and tired of speaking out and being sanctioned. But if we do not speak, it's just as bad as using a pen with no ink. As Malcolm X said, freedom is something that we must do for ourselves. So stop relying on our oppressors to finally hold up their hands. You see, taking accountability is for those who have empathy to understand. So today I realized something different, that freedom is in our hands. Our world is changing and it's our choice, whether we change it or go with it. Just like when I had a dream, I used to think that life could be better if we were on the same team. I used to listen to stories of my ancestors and think finally we're free. Until I became 6 numbers trapped between 3 letters and placed on a list labeled, this is your identity. We are equal, diversity. But I was wrong. Wrong to think that we could ever be free. Wrong to think that we could ever be seen as equals in the eyes of white supremacy. So I stopped dreaming and I started living. I strive for power, love, and unity. I stopped looking for handouts. I'm taking what's owed to me, making room for uprise, giving my oppressors anxiety. You see, for Eurocentric encourages paternalism is a distraction for covert racism. See, I'm tired. I'm tired of seeing my brothers and sisters in pain. I'm breaking those chains, taking those reins, flying back to the motherland until things start to change. They say hope is a word that brings forth positivity, community, and liberty, and a desire for freedom from mental captivity. Action, a need for conversation, saving those who have fallen for an act of redemption. I believe in planting seeds for change, reminding them that we too are kings and queens. Not the idea that we must live beyond our means, but instead nurture the ground that lies beneath our feet, the same grounds in which was robbed from us and our ancestors were beat. Picture this, either we stand up or we sit back and watch it repeat. I believe in rising. I believe in stepping forward and building an empire where we can stop hiding. I say, rise up and take the stage. Let them see your love and not your rage. I say, rise up and know that we are one. Move in silence and let them think that they have won. I say, rise up and hold out your hands. We're not looking for handouts, we're taking our land. I say, rise up. This may look like a war, but in this fight, we're not the ones that will fall. I say, rise up and look for tomorrow. Whether we are black or brown, we all share the sorrow. I say, rise up. We are descendants of strength and warriors of grace. Don't let anyone tell you you're not worthy of your status in society because of your race. Because just like Martin, I had a vision, walking a long road to success where we are the winners. Just like Fred Hampton, you can jail revolutionaries, but you can't jail the revolution. Free from sickness and free from pain. That's our aim. Uniting our brothers and sisters. So plant seeds for change. Rise up, kings and queens. Rise up. Rise up. Rise up. Thank you, everybody.
Ashe, ashe, ashe. Oh,
Hey.
Thank you.
UKAbpsi. Doesn't matter where you go in the world, you're still with us at UKAbpsi. We don't give you permission to ever leave.
Thank you.
Bless you so kindly. Thank you for that. And so we are now going to move on to Ra-Marie. We are so blessed again to welcome back Ra-Marie, and also thinking about the way that we're going to move forward with this next piece. Questions and answers are coming after Ra-Marie has spoken, so please do keep them coming in. We thank you as a priestess of the Asara Set Society, Ra-Marie. So we're looking forward to you sharing with us now from that position of hope. Thank you.
So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak from the perspective of an African-centered priestess from the Asara Set Society. I want to make links between that and Black psychology and how those two things work well together. But I want to do it in a slightly different way. So we spent a good couple of, best part of an hour and a half, nearly 2 hours already together. And what I'd like to do is to play a little music for us to sit back a little bit, so I invite you to, if you want to, close your eyes. Don't focus too hard. Just let yourself be whilst I talk, and you listen to some of the ideas and the thoughts and the understandings that I would like to bring with you today. So I'm going to play a piece of music that was written by a colleague, another therapist. He called himself Solar Speak as a performer. And it is just to kind of set the scene gently. If it's too loud, somebody give me a finger. Can you still hear me? You can hear me? Yeah? Excellent. You can hear the music? Great. Okay. So, I'd like you to just take some deep breaths in and breathe out. Breathe in. Breathe out. Breathe in. And breathe out. So allow your spirit to hear what it needs to hear. So don't focus particularly. You will remember what you need to remember. You'll be inspired by what you need to be inspired by. So I once again invite you to close your eyes, relax, truly relax. So I speak to you from the position of an Osirian priestess. They call us Heta Henu. It means servant of God. From an African-centered perspective, as Baba Wade reminds us constantly, psychology is the study of the soul, of the spirit, of the psyche, the sakhu. Not the study of behavior, the mere manifestations of those thoughts. So as you breathe in and you breathe out, you begin to realize that actually we make our own realities. And what we need to do is to return to Sankofa ways of thinking and being. We must know who we are. We must go back and restore our knowing of ourselves from an ancient wisdom traditions. And the furthest we can go back, or the furthest we will go back at the moment, is to Kemet. African-centered psychology is premised on spirit. The philosophy of African-centered psychology and the Association of Black Psychologists is based on the Ma'at, the ancient principles of balance, harmony, etc. The Naim Akbar in his Community of Self, which has already been mentioned today, talks about the will. He talks about how this is the leader of our community, of our personal individual community. This correlates to Heru, the hero of the Osirian religion, a man born of a virgin birth of the Son of God. Most of you probably heard that story before somewhere. But this story is 6,000 years old. That story is 2,000 years old. We know about theft. We all have this faculty of Heru within us. It is what makes us separate from the animals, because it allows us to be able to choose. That Heru, that hero within us, can allow us to decide we will not be defeated. We are more than us, our animal aspects. We can choose to follow, in the words of Kobe Cambon and the thoughts of Kobe Cambon, our African self-consciousness. We can understand what it means to be African and use that knowledge of our Africanness to separate us from where we find ourselves, the cultures in which we find ourselves now. we can use our extended self orientation, know that we are more than just ourselves, that our spirit expands throughout. And when we unite with others, we unite with the yet unborn, we unite with all of nature, with the entire community. When we speak of community, we're really speaking of not just our blood family and those who live around us, but all people who come from the same place that we come from. Africans, true Africans, regardless of where we find ourselves now. And any attempt to separate that is creation of disharmony, disunity. The Osirian religion believes in the concept of Osir, and Osir is oneness, is unity. And the purpose of our existence on this plane at this time is to unite with each other, to become one with each other, and thus becoming one with God. So, as we keep on breathing in and breathing out, we can look at what that oneness truly looks like. Linda James Myers, when she speaks of optional psychology, talks about this divine self. And we freak out about that a bit. How can Black people be calling themselves God? How can we be talking about being divine? But what we're talking about is an acknowledgement that we were made in the likeness and the image of God. But we're talking about one drop of water to God's ocean. If we as a Black people, as a community, could truly grasp what that means, then nothing that the white people can do or say can harm us, because we know that we are not just a reflection of them, a darkened version of them, because we are not. We are energy, matter, consciousness, and will, and we can use those to overcome the lower parts of our spirit, the animal parts of our being that respond to our physiology, because we will focus our time, our energy, our thoughts on our spirits. The Osirian society bases itself on the principles of Ma'at, but not the 42 laws. We've adapted the 42 laws in the same way as the Christians had the 10 commandments. We have the 11 laws, but these are laws, not commandments. And the law means that if you abide by these 11 principles, you are guaranteed a successful life. And the most important premise of that guarantee is peace. Our spiritual work is to disentangle ourselves from our identity as being only human. Because within us we have 4 brains. And if you look at our brain anatomy, you'll see that there is a part of us that looks remarkably like a bean sprout. You know, just at the base of the spine, base of the brain that goes down into the spinal cord, just by itself, there we have our vegetable brain. On top of that, we have our reptilian brain. On top of that, we have our mammalian brain. And on top of that, we have our prefrontal brain. All of these things, some parts of our brains are zillions of years old. And we function from those when we go into fight, flight, freeze, play dead, when we go into selfishness, when we go into functioning from those lower parts of our being. Our purpose is to not only work from our humane aspects, but to function from our godly aspects, to understand that we have parts of our brain that we need to tap into. And the only way to do that is to encapsulate peace. The dehumanization of us as people means that for many, we do not realize that we are fighting for our very humanity in the wrong places. Because we're fighting for our humanity in the material and physical world. We are taking on the struggle as if their reality is the only reality, that we need to aspire to be successful according to their rules, their ideas, their notions of what success means. We need to understand that we are already divine. We need to understand that if we have not a single garment to wear, we are still godly. And in that godliness, we are good. And in that goodness, we are godly. The question isn't are we good enough? The question is, are we God enough? I'm hoping that my sister is listening today. Are we God enough? There are 11 laws of Ma'at. The 10th law is the physical law, the law of Geb. And in Geb, it's the physical and metaphysical parts of ourselves. And the law says, from heaven we came, and to heaven we will return. Expect no enduring works on earth. This is not the place for us to expect to gain things. Because the law of Amen, which is the first law, is, I am made in the likeness of a peace that nothing can disturb. Reclaim your peace that you may attain your reason for coming and your existence on earth to enjoy life. But to enjoy life, we have to be able to be peaceful. Peaceful in times of struggle. Peaceful when things are going wrong. Because we can then be joyful when things are going right. And these are the only two emotions that are not injurious to us. Every other emotion that we feel causes us great pain. It is the reason why we are overrepresented everywhere where we're not supposed to be. It's the reason why we are struggling and we're suffering and we are dying from high blood pressure, diabetes, because these are all stress reactions because we have lost the ability to remain at peace. And it physically actually impacts on our physicality. So how do we become peaceful? How do we cultivate this peace and joy? We need to spend this time, whilst we are indoors, going deeper into ourselves. We need to breathe. We need to take time, and we need to understand the importance of not allowing ourselves to be drawn into somebody else's worldview and somebody else's battle. It's interesting that Maxine was speaking earlier about politics. And for many years, I used to say that personal therapy for the Black community was a political act. Any time that we spend time focusing on ourselves, thinking about ourselves, engaging in ourselves, working in ourselves, that is a political act. In recent years, I've added, it is also a revolutionary act. We need to spend that time understanding why it's important for us to look after ourselves, to learn about ourselves, and to unite with each other. To do that, we need to forgive ourselves and to forgive each other, to be compassionate with ourselves and with each other. From peace to joy and joy to peace. That's how our lives should be. We don't need to teach you how to be joyful. Even babies are born and they're smiling within minutes. They're laughing. There's no way they can understand the joke, but they're laughing. They can express joy. But peace has to be worked at. Because all those other brains we were talking about earlier will come into play immediately. You step on my corn toe and I'm going to react. What we need to do is put a block in that so we do not go to those places. So that we do not automatically jump to criticism, attack, anger, fear, resentment. We have a lot to be angry for. We have a lot to be resentful for. But we need to understand that we must also acknowledge everybody's on their own path, doing their own things. I am grateful that I came back in this incarnation, in this body, in this race. I would not want to have been born on the other side. I would not want to deal with having to be who they are. I am grateful that God allowed me to have this experience in this body at this time, so I can heighten and really begin to understand and work my unity with others. The law of Tahuti says, when your thoughts and feelings and actions reflect the word of God, then the power of God's spirit and peace that nothing can challenge will flow through your being. Black psychology movement talk often of diunitality, being able to hold the union of opposites. And we really have to understand what that means for us, because that is what Tahuti represents. The ability to let the warring brothers go home at peace. Everything that we do should be worked towards a win-win. Everybody should go home, should leave any interactions we have with them undamaged, unharmed. It's not a competition. We're not trying to get better on somebody else. It's about sharing. It's about loving, and truly loving, which means giving, expecting nothing in return. The law of Ma'at, which I'm going to end on, says that God needs us to come into the world to fulfill God's need is an act of love. And only through love for God can we fulfill our love for others. And the command is, become the love of God in the world for the protection of the world. Not just to protect ourselves individually, but to protect our families, our communities, and eventually humanity. It is our role to heal ourselves, our family, our community. And through doing that work, we will heal humanity, because we will lead people back to their true source of what they are. As Wade would often say, spirit having a physical experience. So in the theme of today, I want us to make sure that we all Zola up on ourselves and on each other and on the world. Thank you.
Ashe. Ashe. I'm going to switch to
I felt that.
I'm going to switch to gallery for everybody, because yeah, I'm in a space of needing a moment. Just a moment, and I'm sure there are listeners that need that moment too. We are an absolutely profound people. We are a profound people. And I can feel myself getting quite emotional now. I have to pay my absolute respects to Ra-Marie, because when I came to Birmingham as a young drama psychotherapist, I tell people the story. I went for my first session with her. I came out and I thought, I can't go back. But she has literally helped me to reframe my thinking, my way of being, how I see the world, how I see my children, how I see our community. So I give thanks to you, Ra-Marie. You are an absolute blessing. for this nation and beyond. Thank you. Ooh. Malcolm, I believe our family have questions for us. So I'm going to ask that you all stay muted, and Malcolm's obviously unmuted. And if a particular question is posed to you, then you all are able to unmute yourselves. And yeah, we'll take it from there. Thank you, Malcolm.
Okay. I don't want to keep everybody too long. We have 4 questions, 2 rather long and 2 fairly short. The first question is really posed towards the educators. Perhaps Kehinde or Deon might want to pick this up. It's from Joan in Bristol. We struggle and send our children to university in hope. They struggle with institutionalized racism. They grow away from us and sometimes away from community. And sadly, many become mentally unwell. Do we keep sending our children to these white institutions in hope? If so, how do we help them succeed? Small question there, Kehinde.
Can I take that one?
Oh yeah, sure, Deon, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I think the first thing is to think, we have to listen to what our children are saying in terms of what they want from going to university. Is it about the takeaway, or is it more about what the parents want? Because if it's about the parents wanting, right, we want our children to get a good job, or is it more about them developing socially? What is the takeaway for the individual? Are we pushing our children to study things that we think is right? Or are they actually studying what their passion is? Because I do think that is something that sometimes there is this conflict. Is it going to lead to this outcome? And so that's the first conflict. Are the individuals who are actually going to the university, who have are they feeling that they're doing what they want? Also, as well, it is about challenging the kind of marks, challenging the comments, challenging the ways in which all of these, the microaggressions, the macroaggressions, all of these things that we constantly have, and actually calling them out. I know I'm working on something within our university, Birmingham City University, around reporting acts of discrimination, because when our students have experienced racism, or they've felt that the complaints and appeals procedure is not sufficient, it seems like it's not a very good, the outcome is never great. I personally have had a negative experience with that with my PhD, where the university has treated me despicably as well. But would I change the fact that I now have my PhD? No, I had to go through and I had to endure a lot. But the fact is, there's so many things at play. But I think the first thing that we should be doing is listening to what the young person wants from their education and supporting them. And what we have to remember is, just because the societal structures are okay, you go in the UK, you go to school, you go to further education and higher education, that trajectory is not right for everybody. And I think we have to try and sometimes dismantle the way that we think about education. There are more informal aspects of education, and there's also a lot of our students as well on the Black Studies course are mature students. They've come into education when it's been right for them. So I do think we shouldn't be pressuring, or we shouldn't necessarily think that this degree is always going to end up, and the young person's always going to get the outcome that we desire. It takes a long time, and there's different routes to get to where people want to.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I just jump in. Can I just add to that?
Oh, sorry.
Can I just add in?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, I think one of the things we think about is, I went to the whitest university ever, the University of Bath or University of Bath. There were 6 African Caribbean students in my entire year, in any course, the year I went to the university. And anybody's been to Bath, it's like one of the whitest places I've ever been, right? But the reason I came through and got through was, one, going to the States and finding Black psychology, but also, you know, we don't have to rely on these places, whether it be schools or whether it be universities, for our education. You go to these places to get the credentials to get a decent job. That's it. But if you want to find your actual education, you got to find it elsewhere. And I think that's probably where, as a community, we kind of fell down a bit. You know, when I was coming up, we had more Saturday schools, we had community bookshops, we had a lot more spaces where you mean the bookcases behind me, that's just my mom and dad's books. That's where I got my education from. So if your kid goes to university thinking they're going to get their education, they are going to have problems because the university is one of the whitest places with a white education and Eurocentric curriculum. So we have to take responsibility of our own education. And everything that I get paid to do now, I learned outside university. But you get the credentials because that's what society says. You've got to get those credentials. Let's not pretend that's not education.
Okay, thank you. Sister Theopia.
Blessings. I agree with everything that's been said, and also this could be a conversation in and of itself. I want to contribute a couple of things. I'm reminded of what a beautiful sister from South Africa said, that when she remembered going to school, she said she remembered having a burning fire to learn, and yet when she went to school, they threw water on it. So we have to be so this is a universal experience for us. Going into any institution is intended to attack our spirits, wound our minds. And so we must therefore inoculate ourselves. If we're in the space, first and foremost, we all do not have the luxury or opportunity to be educated outside of this space. So we have to inoculate our children as they're going in, and the ways in which that can happen have already been alluded to in terms of what we're teaching and showing them at home. But more specifically, I think that we have to go back to the realities that we have to do this as a full community. I should not be concerned about what's happening in school only because I have a child there or I'm going to school. All of our community needs to be concerned, and it is another political act and political statement. How do we collectively leverage our power? How do we, as scholars, who when there's one or two at the table, how do we make sure they're not alone in their authority? How do we connect that up? And this is one of the ways in which UKAbpsi as a collective can step into, and we can continue to learn how to do a better job by this through the use of technology. If there's something that we want to see happening differently, and if we document that clearly, how do we collectively push it through? Here are the tenets of how children should be educated. How do we interface with the systems that define what's supposed to happen there? Leverage our dollars, leverage our power, use our census counts, any means necessary.
Okay,
I would say.
Thank you, thank you. Just lastly, quickly, Kaylee, you wanted to say a couple of words?
Thank you. Yeah, it was just to add, I just recently finished my master's, and just kind of secondary what Professor Andrew was saying is that I was only Black individual on the course. And the tutor said to me, he goes, well, rather than focusing on what you're getting, focus on what you're not getting. And if it wasn't for my placement at Pattergift, I wouldn't have had the richest learning, I wouldn't have had a rich learning. And it's actually, that's what kept me going. I did my whole 2 years placement at Pattergift, and I came out a lot stronger and a lot better. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, thank you. I love that idea, the idea of inoculating our children to protect them before they go into university. Second question, this has actually come from Hiro, and was directed to Baba and Mama Nobles, but perhaps one for any of the elders. You've been supporting our people for 50 plus years since the foundation of UKAbpsi. Now, they haven't changed. Have we changed as a people? And if not, what do we need to do to change us and to change the experience of our communities?
I think that's a very good question. They have not changed, and I'm going to slightly apologize for this terminology, but a savage can only be a savage.
Mm-hmm.
And so we should not. And so where we have changed is that we are now recognizing that we're dealing with savages, and that we have to look into ourselves to come up with the solution for how we aspire, not just survive, but aspire in these places. The places don't make us, we make the place. I think it was Malcolm or Farrakhan that said, when the light turns on, the dark knows what to do. And so when we become Black, when we become African, all those anti-Black, anti-African things know what to do. Yeah. And we're seeing that here in the States with this new Black militia. When these brothers stood up and came out with their arms and their bulletproof vests, white folks knew what to do. They didn't do all the horrendous savagery that they do when they're chasing us down the street or pulling us behind a pickup truck. So I think that we are changing. I think we are changing. I think the fact that we have this conversation going on right now, given the literally 400 years of absolute dehumanization, where the intent was to validate that we were less than human, and now we have these body of Black folk, intellectual, thinking a thought. Think about that. We are actually thinking a thought that is not filtered through white ideas. And we need to keep doing that. We're not doing a lot of that now. We still are doing this default, where we default back to whiteness and think that that's where we should, how we should talk, what we should talk, when we should talk. But we are engaging in a new moment here. And that new moment is that we are beginning to say, we are thinking a thought that is not white. We're thinking African thought. It was Fanon who said, just to imagine the death of your oppressor liberates you. You don't have to actually shoot him. Just imagine the death of your oppressor liberates you. Just imagine Black folks thinking a thought that ain't condoned by white folks is liberating. And we are doing that. England, Brazil, Haiti, Cuba, United States, Canada, we're seeing us beginning to grapple with, sometimes in a little scary way, because it is frightening, but we're grappling, we're sneaking up on. We are sneaking up on liberation. And it takes a little while to get courage enough. And then we see all these folk doing it. We do what? Our Zola upping on each other causes the reactivation of our molecular structure in our minds to think differently. So I think we are changing.
Yeah.
I think we have changed and we are changing.
Wonderful.
To remember that we are the Sembi, a divinely powered people, and that how to call on our ancestors for our help. They're there to help us, and if we don't call on them, at some point they will turn their backs on us. So remember, call on them for our assistance.
And make the tools. We think about us as human beings. We had at some point been confronted with a problem, and we had to create a tool called an axe, called a wheel. We created those things. So now we have to create the tools, and I believe it's in the language and in the logic that liberates us. That's why I said we should think carefully about what does Zola mean. And then if we can raise our children up to see that their task is to Zola up on each other, or we can raise our children so that when they're in the classroom being oppressed, being disregarded, disrespected, our children are taught to stand up and say, "Buka mukati ya buka kumbazi." Think what happens in that classroom at that moment? You see what I'm saying? Give them tools. We suffer the oppression, we suffer the denigration, but we teach our children that when you feel that they are dehumanizing you, you stand up, baby. You stand up and you say as loud as you can, "Buka mukati ya buka kumazi," and I'll be up there to back you up. I'll come to school to back you up. Yeah. We need to create tools that keeps liberating us. Words, language, ideas. You know, ideas, I've said a long time ago that ideas are the substance of behavior. And we have been drunk on the substance of white thought.
Yeah. So
now we got to sober up. We sober up by saying, "Buka mukati ya buka kumbazi." We sober up by saying, "Zola up on us." Zola up on us. We should have our young people now take that notion of 2B3, to be African, to be family, to be awesome. Take 2B3 and make some music with that. Drop some word songs on that. Let me hear some rhyming about 2B3. 2B3, you and me. Woo, woo, woo. we get to look at ourselves and bring the best of ourselves, because we are literally a magnificent people.
Yeah, yeah, indeed.
And I think Ukila, that was a gauntlet thrown down to you.
I was actually looking right at her too. I was looking right at her.
You know what? I was clicking on the mic on the picture instead of down the bottom. So I was like, yeah.
Oh, I'm glad it wasn't to me.
I'm ready. I accept the challenge.
Okay.
Our young people are definitely ready.
Yes.
Right. Thanks for those words of power.
Okay, do we have time for one more question? Real quick, Malcolm?
Yeah, okay, it's a quick one. It ties some of the politics, and it's an old question, but I think relevant still. Should we be focusing more on repatriation and rematriation back to the motherland? And anybody like to pick that up?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually had a conversation with Sister Ya, who deals with repatriation back to Ghana. So we're working with King Neneteta IV in creating certain structures. And it's just about marrying all of those minds and creating the journey here. I think one of the things that we do is we tend to separate, and all of these things need to happen concurrently. And that's why you need to bring out the dynamic teams, because when the teams are very dynamic and start to grow from a robustness, and as I said, that thing.
Oh, I think.
We lost Steve.
But in the meantime, Viv, I know you wanted to pick up on.
Yes. I mean, the first point I want to make is that we're global Africans. So on one level, the whole planet is Africa. It's a state of mind, and our Uncle Wade Nobles has already alluded to that. And I think it's an important jumping off point. And at the same time, as global Africans, we need to unite within the diaspora and reconnect with the continent. In the past, what we've done is we've seen repatriation programs where people have gone back and made their homes on the continent, and that's been that. I don't think that's where we are now, especially with technology, the 21st century. You have to really think about the whole planet as being our African worldview. And I'm doing a lot of work on the continent with the diaspora organizations across all of the countries to get diasporans back on the continent as part of the continent's ongoing development and unification. So yes, there's a very important strategic plan around all of that. And if it works for people to return to one of the African countries that's going to require their skills, abilities and resources, then absolutely, make that happen. But I don't necessarily believe it's an either or in the way that people may have viewed it in the past. And we have to be very practical about it. And even as I've been on this very powerful and important conference and event, I've had my brothers on the continent WhatsApping and texting me. And it's a really important point that that everybody needs to understand. We need to, because I also believe this is Eurocentricized, this romanticized view of what Africa is, as though it doesn't have its own issues and challenges. There is work to be done. I think we have to get our minds right even before we attempt to, return to the continent and say that we're going to be positive contributors to the movement that's taking place, the true Pan-African movement that's taking place on the continent.
Okay, thank you very much, Viv. I think we're going to have to end the questions there, but thank you all for your responses, and to those on Facebook who contributed their questions.
Yes, thank you, Malcolm. And just to, sorry to have to cut that short, but I really want to bring back in Dr. Theopia Jackson just to kind of round up for us, because I know you've been listening to all the conversations today, sisters. So it would be amiss of us not to have an opportunity to hear your thoughts, for us to get a sense of some takeaways and some action points for us today.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. So when we think about how how we can help our people emerge. I think that the formula is complex. There is no one way of doing it. All hands are on deck. We must first and foremost recognize who we are and whose we are. I think we've been distracted too long about discerning who's Black and who's not Black, what is African, what is it not. We have to get beyond that. If there's no other time than now, then shame on us for not being able to see that is part of the dis-ease that we have been injected with. This pandemic has pulled the covers back one more time. Also, I would say that we are living the history that we must document. What will be said after this should be our call to action now. We are the ancestors we are meant to become. So that must activate us to recognize one another. So the idea of Zola love, this activation is not, it's an energy force. It's social action, it's transformation. It means to be and do. We can no longer sit silently. We can no longer work in isolation from one another. We can no longer ask for, plead with, negotiate with. We must collectively lock our arms, wrap up our babies, and become a force to be reckoned with. A force to be reckoned with. We must all know through Sawubona, you are not alone. It's like any other real family. You mess with my cousin, you got all this other folk coming with you. We must be that people. We must go beyond, and we have, and this is an essence of doing it right now. Every situation presents something. So this pandemic has created this opportunity for Black force to unite. It has created an opportunity to hear the commonality of our pain and recognize the collective energy of our force. We must be a force to be reckoned with. How do we politicize everything we do? Everything we do. Nothing is separate from that. I love the calming space in which our dear sister Robin Marie brought us. But I'm also in this moment very clear that the Black rage must be activated too. Must be activated. We must do something with this. And to awaken the African in us is to be free. So those would be my action items. First and foremost, how do you connect? Connect with somebody. If you are Black and you're not in a Black space, create a Black space. You cannot do this alone. I love the quote that someone, I won't say, a lot of quotes have come up that we want to embrace. That's first and foremost. The second one is that's a role that ABPsi should be stepping into. How do we connect with not only our like-minded Black organizations, but also our grassroots wisdoms and become that force again, centralized. Keep these conversations going, use us, communicate with us, and also write the new future. Our young people are experiencing a different world than us. So we must also learn from them, give them what they need, and follow them as well. We have to stop the Black blaming, resist the temptation to shame one another in order to get a seat at somebody's table. And I close by saying this proverb that stays with me forever and ever, because when we think about children, we are all somebody's children. We are the child of the divine. So we say, if the children do not feel the embrace and warmth of the village, it'll do what? They'll come back and burn it up. And that's where we are right now. We have got to step up and love each other in an active way for the future of all humanity, but specifically for Black humanity. Thank you for having me here.
Ashe. I'm going to switch back to to our gallery. Thank you so kindly. And as we come towards our close, thank you, Dr. Jackson. I know you have to head off to another meeting, but as we come together to close, I'm just going to invite back to just do the closing remarks, our president, Dr. Michelle Perry-Springer, to close us out and to share the final remarks with our presenters and also with our Facebook family.
Thank you so much, Clancy, and thank you so much, presenters. I mean, I'm sitting here just in awe of what you have shared. I'm so happy that you have spent the time with us, just showing your heart and your mind with us. It just falls on me to say thank you, and a gracious thank you. You have shown us not only what it is that you're about, but what it is that we are about. And really, you've given us a call to action. I'm taking everything that Ethiopia has said, and we have to wrap that up and make sure that every person out there, everyone who's listening to this, make sure that you are talking about this in your spaces. Make sure that you are connected, that you join one of these organizations that is sitting in front of you, that you go out and you do something. This is the time to do. And you've got so much support and a wealth of knowledge and goodwill and just love. And I'm just going to stop now by saying, let's just soul it up. Thank you so much. Clancy, thank you.
Ashe, everybody, and thank you and welcome. Stay safe, healthy and well until we meet again.
Ashe.
Ashe.
Thank you, you Black folks in Britain. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Ashe.
My family.
Yes.
My family.
Yes.
Thank you, family.
Thank you.